The Galactic Concordance had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 27 alien species had joined together to form the most powerful empire the universe had ever seen. They owned 10,000 worlds. They commanded fleets that could block out the light of suns. They believed with complete certainty that they were the masters of all creation. When their scout ships found Earth in the year 2157, they laughed. The humans were so small, so weak. They had not even left their own solar system yet. They played with simple fusion reactors and slow chemical rockets like children playing with toys. The Concordance had seen hundreds of species like this before. Young races, primitive races, races that existed only to serve or to be harvested for resources. High Arbiter Kethvos, the supreme ruler of the Concordance, did not even bother to look at the report himself. He sent a junior diplomat to deliver the message to Earth. The message was simple. The message was the same one they had given to 1,000 worlds before. Submit or be harvested. The humans could join the Concordance as servants. They would work in mines. They would build ships. They would do whatever their masters commanded. Or they could refuse, and the Concordance would take their planet anyway. They would take the water. They would take the minerals. They would take the humans themselves and sell them as slaves across the galaxy. The diplomat expected fear. He expected begging. He expected the humans to fall to their knees and accept their place in the natural order of things. Instead, the humans asked for time to consider. The Concordance gave them 1 year. 1 year to accept their fate. 1 year to prepare for submission. On the last day of that year, every satellite around Earth went dark. Every radio signal stopped. Every transmission ceased. The entire planet wrapped itself in silence, and the Concordance watched with confusion and amusement. They sent probe ships to investigate. The probes found nothing. The humans had hidden themselves completely. They had gone underground, perhaps, buried themselves in caves and tunnels like frightened animals. The Concordance laughed again. Let the primitives hide. Let them tremble in the dark. When the time came, they would dig them out like worms from the soil. Years passed. 10 years. 20 years. 30 years. The Concordance forgot about Earth. They had more important matters to attend to. Wars to fight. Worlds to conquer. Slave rebellions to crush. The small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy was not worth their attention. It was a problem for later, a footnote in history. But deep beneath the surface of Earth, something incredible was happening. For the first time in human history, every nation had united. Every country, every people, every government. The old wars were forgotten. The old hatreds were put aside. Russians worked beside Americans. Chinese worked beside Indians. Africans worked beside Europeans. Every human being who could contribute did contribute. Every scientist, every engineer, every worker, every dreamer. They had captured the Concordance probe ship before it could escape. They had torn it apart piece by piece. They had studied its technology with desperate hunger. The alien science was thousands of years ahead of anything humans had ever created. But humans were clever. Humans were stubborn. Humans refused to accept the impossible. Within 5 years, they understood the basics of faster-than-light travel. Within 10 years, they had improved upon it. Within 15 years, they had discovered something the Concordance had never even imagined. Deep in the laboratories beneath the Swiss mountains, a young physicist named David Chen made a breakthrough that would change the universe forever. He found a way to fold not just space, but time itself. He could create a bubble around an object that would move so fast that to anyone watching from outside, time would appear to stop completely. The military leaders wanted weapons. The scientists wanted to explore. But the people of Earth wanted something else. They wanted a message. They wanted to show the galaxy that humanity was not prey, that humanity would never kneel, that humanity would never be slaves. So they built a ship. They called it the Adamantine. The name came from an ancient Greek word meaning unbreakable, and unbreakable it was. 3 kilometers of blackened armor, weapons that could crack moons like eggs, a reactor core that burned with the fire of a captured star. It was the most powerful machine humanity had ever created. It was their answer to the Concordance. But more than anything else, it carried the Erebus drive, the device that could stop time itself. Captain Elena Vasquez was chosen to command the ship. She was 62 years old. Her hair had turned gray. Her face carried the lines of a hard life. She had been a young woman when the Concordance first came to Earth. She had watched the compliance bombing that killed 3 million people as a warning. She had seen her parents die in the fires. For 30 years she had waited. For 30 years she had trained. For 30 years she had carried the memory of that day like a stone in her heart. Now finally she stood on the bridge of the Adamantine. The crew around her was silent. The moment was too big for words. On the view screen, she could see the stars waiting. The galaxy that had dismissed humanity as primitives. The empire that had threatened to enslave her people. She sat in the captain's chair. She placed her hands on the armrests. She took a deep breath. "Set course for the Concordance throne world," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. "It is time the galaxy learned what happens when you threaten humanity's children." The Adamantine's engines roared to life. The ship moved forward into the darkness, between stars, and the silence of 30 years was about to be broken. The Adamantine moved through space like a black ghost. Its hull absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Against the darkness of the void, it was nearly invisible. Only the faint blue glow of its engines gave any sign that it existed at all. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the observation window of her quarters. She could not sleep. She had not slept properly in 30 years. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the same thing. Fire falling from the sky. Buildings crumbling. Her mother's hand reaching for her through the smoke. Her father's voice calling her name one last time before the silence. The Concordance called it a compliance bombing. They said it was necessary. They said humanity needed to understand its place. 3 million people died in 6 hours, and the aliens called it a lesson. Elena had been 32 years old that day. She had been a naval commander, proud of her service, proud of her country. She had believed that humanity was strong. She had believed that they could fight back. She had been wrong. In 2157, humanity had nothing that could challenge the Concordance. Their weapons were toys. Their ships were made of paper compared to the alien warcraft. They could not fight. They could only hide and hope and plan. Now, 30 years later, Elena looked at the ship around her and allowed herself a small smile. The Adamantine was not a toy. The Adamantine was a god of war wrapped in black metal. She walked through the corridors of the ship, nodding to crew members as she passed. There were 3,000 people aboard, soldiers, engineers, scientists, pilots. Each one had been chosen from millions of volunteers. Each one had lost someone to the Concordance. Each one carried their own stone of grief and anger. Lieutenant Commander James Okonkwo fell into step beside her. He was her first officer, a tall man from Nigeria with kind eyes and steady hands. He had lost his entire village in a secondary bombing meant to destroy resistance movements. "Captain," he said, "the crew is ready, the ship is ready, but I have to ask, are we really going to do this? Are we really going to fly into the heart of the most powerful empire in the galaxy with a single ship?" Elena stopped walking. She turned to face him. "Do you know why I chose the name Adamantine, James?" He shook his head. "In the old stories, adamantine was a material that could not be broken. Not by any force, not by any weapon, not by anything in heaven or earth or hell." She placed her hand on the wall of the ship. "This ship is made of something even stronger. It is made of 30 years of human suffering, 30 years of human anger, 30 years of human hope. They cannot break that. Nothing can break that." They continued walking until they reached the engineering section. Here the heart of the ship hummed with power. The reactor core glowed behind thick shields of quantum crystalline armor. The energy output was enough to power a small planet, but the reactor was not what made the Adamantine special. The Erebus drive sat in a chamber at the very center of the ship. It was surprisingly small, a sphere of swirling darkness about 3 meters across. Inside that sphere, the laws of physics bent and twisted in ways that even the scientists did not fully understand. Dr. Sarah Kim, the chief physicist, was monitoring the drive when Elena arrived. Sarah was 70 years old, but her mind was still sharp. She had spent her entire career building this machine. Her daughter had died in the compliance bombing. Her granddaughter had been born in the underground bunkers and had never seen the sun. "Captain," Sarah said, "the drive is functioning perfectly. We can engage it whenever you give the order." Elena looked at the swirling sphere of darkness. Explain it to me again, Doctor. In simple terms. What exactly will happen when we activate this? Sarah smiled. It was a question Elena had asked many times before, but she never tired of answering it. When we activate the Erebus drive, we create a bubble of accelerated time around the ship. Inside the bubble, time moves normally for us, but outside the bubble, time moves so slowly that it essentially stops. To anyone watching from the outside, we will appear to move faster than light itself, faster than thought, faster than anything they have ever seen. And they cannot stop us? They cannot even see us. Their weapons will freeze in mid-flight. Their ships will hang motionless in space. Their sensors will not be able to track us. We will move among them like a ghost moving through a world of statues. Elena nodded slowly. And the weapons? The main cannon can crack a planet in half. The secondary batteries can destroy entire fleets. The missile systems carry warheads that burn with the heat of stars. Sarah paused. We have enough firepower to end the Concordance forever. Every ship, every station, every world. We could burn them all. Elena was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her parents. She thought about the 3 million dead. She thought about the families torn apart, the children who grew up without sunlight, the generations that had lived in fear. She could end it all. She could make them pay. The power to do so was right here, humming in the dark heart of her ship. But that was not why they had built the adamantine. We are not going to destroy them, Elena said finally. We are going to do something much worse. We are going to make them understand. We are going to show them what humanity truly is. And when they see it, when they truly understand, they will never threaten us again. She turned to face her crew. Prepare the Erebus drive. We arrive at Axion Prime in 6 hours. The humming of the drive grew louder. The ship moved faster, and somewhere ahead the greatest empire in the galaxy waited, unaware that everything was about to change. Axion Prime was the heart of the Galactic Concordance. It was not a planet, but a station, a structure so large that it could be seen from neighboring star systems. Billions of beings lived within its metal walls. The rulers of 27 species walked its golden corridors. The wealth of 10,000 conquered worlds filled its treasure vaults. Around Axion Prime, the greatest military force in galactic history stood guard. 12 defense fleets, 800 orbital fortresses, 50,000 warships. Weapons that could destroy stars, shields that could stop asteroids, sensors that could detect a single ship from 1,000 light-years away. High Arbiter Kethavos sat upon his throne in the highest tower of the station. He was ancient, even by the standards of his long-lived species. He had ruled the Concordance for 300 years. He had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds. He had ordered the deaths of billions. He feared nothing in the universe because there was nothing in the universe that could challenge his power. When his sensors detected a single ship emerging from fold space at the edge of his system, he barely looked up from his morning meal. What is it? He asked his admiral. A single vessel, High Arbiter, unknown design, unknown origin. It emerged from fold space approximately 3 light minutes from the outer defense perimeter. Kethvos clicked his mandibles in annoyance. One ship? Send a patrol to intercept and destroy it. Do not bother me with such minor matters. The admiral bowed and turned to give the order. But before he could speak, the sensors screamed. The single ship was moving. It was moving faster than anything the Concordance had ever recorded. It crossed the distance between the edge of the system and the first defense fleet in less than a heartbeat. It did not slow down. It did not stop. It simply passed through the fleet like they were not even there. High Arbiter, the admiral shouted. The ship is inside our defensive perimeter. It passed through the first fleet without firing a single shot. Kethavos stood from his throne. For the first time in 300 years, he felt something cold moving in his chest. Something he had not felt since he was a child. Fear. All fleets, engage, he commanded. Destroy that ship. 50,000 warships turned their weapons toward the adamantine. Energy beams capable of melting mountains lanced through space. Missiles carrying enough explosive force to crack continents roared from their launchers. Kinetic weapons moving at a fraction of the speed of light tore through the void. None of them hit. The adamantine activated its Erebus drive. On the bridge, Captain Elena Vasquez, watched the universe transform around her. One moment, space was filled with fire and light and death. The next moment, everything stopped. The energy beams froze in place like threads of solid light. The missiles hung motionless in the darkness. The ships drifted without power, without movement, without life. Time itself had stopped. "Beautiful," Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo whispered. "It is like the entire universe is holding its breath." Elena nodded. She looked out at the frozen fleets. Thousands of ships, millions of crew members, all trapped in a single endless moment. They could not see the adamantine. They could not feel it pass. They would never know how close death had come until it was already too late. "Take us forward," she ordered. "Slowly. Let them see us when we choose to be seen." The adamantine moved through the frozen battlefield like a black shark swimming through still water. It passed between warships close enough to touch their hulls. It wove between frozen missiles and suspended energy beams. It moved with terrible grace through a galaxy that had stopped breathing. On Axion Prime, High Arbiter Kethavos watched his tactical display with growing horror. His fleets were not responding. His weapons were not firing. His sensors showed the enemy ship moving through his defenses like they did not exist. Then his display flickered and died. The lights in his throne room went dark. The hum of machinery fell silent. For one terrible moment, everything stopped. Then the lights returned, and through the massive viewport of his throne room, Kethavos saw it. The adamantine hung in space directly before him, close enough that he could see every detail of its black hull, close enough that he could read the words carved into its bow. The words were written in 1,000 languages, every language the Concordance had ever catalogued, every tongue of every species they had ever conquered. The message was the same in all of them. "We remember, we forgive nothing, and we are no longer afraid." Kethavos stumbled backward. His legs would not hold him. He fell against his throne and stared at the human ship with eyes that had witnessed the deaths of billions, but had never seen anything like this. Around Axion Prime, time resumed. Fleets drifted in confusion. Weapons that had been firing moments ago now pointed at empty space. Missiles that had been streaking toward their target now flew harmlessly into the void. Millions of Concordant soldiers looked at their instruments and found them useless. The adamantine did not fire. It did not need to. It simply waited, patient as death, silent as the grave. The entire military might of the Galactic Concordance surrounded it, and it waited like a parent watching children throw tantrums. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in her chair and looked at the throne room of the High Arbiter through her view screen. She could see him there, fallen against his throne, ancient and powerful and more afraid than he had ever been in his long, cruel life. She smiled. "Open a communication channel," she said. "I think it is time we had a conversation." For 6 hours, the adamantine did not move. It hung in space before the throne world of Axion Prime like a monument to everything the Concordance had failed to understand. The greatest military force in galactic history surrounded it. 50,000 warships, 800 fortresses, weapons capable of destroying stars, and none of them dared to fire. High Arbiter Kethavos had given the order. He had screamed it, actually. His voice had cracked with fear and rage. "All weapons fire on the alien vessel. Destroy it. Burn it from the sky." The weapons had fired. Energy beams had lanced toward the black hole. Missiles had screamed through space. Kinetic rounds had torn through the void at incredible speeds. And then time had stopped again. The adamantine had moved, just slightly, just enough to avoid every single shot, just enough to prove that it could. Then it had returned to its position and waited. After the third attempt, Kethavos stopped giving the order. Inside the station, panic had become hysteria. Billions of beings watched the human ship through cameras and viewports. They watched it sitting there, silent, patient. They watched the message carved into its hull. "We remember, we forgive nothing, and we are no longer afraid." Rumors spread faster than light. The humans had returned, the primitives from the small blue world, the ones the Concordance had dismissed, the ones they had bombed into submission, the ones they had forgotten. They had not forgotten. On the bridge of the adamantine, Captain Elena Vasquez waited. She sat in her chair with her hands folded in her lap. Her crew moved around her in silence, monitoring systems, watching sensors, waiting for her command. Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo stood beside her. "Captain," he said quietly, "the High Arbiter has attempted to contact us 17 times. Shall we respond?" "Not yet," Elena said. "Let him wait. Let them all wait. Let them understand what it feels like." What feels like? Elena turned to look at him. Her eyes were calm, but deep within them, something ancient and terrible burned. "We waited 30 years, James. We hid in the dark. We built our ship in secret. We trained our crews in silence. We waited and waited and waited because we had no choice." She turned back to the viewport. "Now they wait for us. Now they hide behind their weapons and pray. Now they understand what we felt. The helplessness, the fear, the knowing that your fate is in someone else's hands." 6 hours passed. The Concordance fleets did not move. The Adamantine did not move. The galaxy held its breath. Finally, High Arbiter Keth Voss broke. He opened a communication channel directly to the human ship. His image appeared on the main view screen of the Adamantine bridge. He was old, older than Elena had imagined. His scales had faded to gray. His eyes, once sharp with cruelty, now swam with tears of fear. "Please," he said. The words seemed to cost him everything. "Please, what do you want?" Elena stood from her chair. She walked forward until she stood directly before the screen. Behind her, her crew was silent. "High Arbiter Keith Voss," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. 30 years ago, you sent a message to Earth. You told us to submit or be harvested. Do you remember?" The High Arbiter nodded slowly. "I remember. You killed 3 million of my people in a compliance bombing. You destroyed our cities. You murdered our families. You told us we were nothing, primitives, animals to be enslaved or slaughtered." "I remember," he whispered again. Elena leaned forward. "I was there. I watched the fire fall from the sky. I watched my parents die. I held my mother's hand as she took her last breath. I was 32 years old. And I learned that day what the universe truly was. I learned that the strong take what they want and the weak suffer." She paused. The silence stretched between them. "But I also learned something else. I learned that humanity does not break. We do not surrender. We do not accept our fate. We fight. We plan. We build. We wait. And when the time comes, we rise." She gestured at the ship around her. "This is what we built in the dark, High Arbiter. This is what your compliance bombing created. You thought you were teaching us to fear. Instead, you taught us to become something you cannot imagine, something you cannot fight, something you cannot stop." The High Arbiter's voice trembled. "Then destroy us. End it. If you have come for revenge, take it." Elena was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her parents. She thought about the 3 million dead. She thought about the children who had grown up underground, never seeing sunlight, never knowing peace. She could end the Concordance with a single command. The weapons of the Adamantine could crack Axion Prime like an egg. They could burn the fleets. They could hunt down every Concordance world and turn them to ash. They could become the monsters. "No," Elena said finally. "We did not come here for revenge." The High Arbiter looked up, confusion mixing with his fear. "Then why? Why did you come?" "To teach you," Elena said. "To show you what we are. To make you understand that humanity is not prey. We are not slaves. We are not primitives. We are the species that looked into the darkness and refused to kneel. And today, you will learn what happens when we choose mercy instead of vengeance." She stepped back. Her eyes met the eyes of the High Arbiter. "You will release all enslaved species. You will withdraw from human space. You will never threaten Earth again. And you will remember this day. You will tell your children and their children. You will tell them that when humanity could have chosen destruction, we chose to let you live." Her voice hardened. "Pray that you never give us reason to return." The Adamantine left as quietly as it had arrived. One moment, it was there. The next moment, it was gone. No flash of light, no thunder of engines. It simply disappeared into the darkness between stars, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same. High Arbiter Keth Voss stood at his viewport for a long time after the ship vanished. He stared at the empty space where it had been. His hands trembled. His legs felt weak. In 300 years of rule, he had never felt so small. Around Axion Prime, the fleets slowly came back to life. Sensors rebooted. Weapon systems reset. Communications channels crackled with confused voices. Millions of soldiers asked the same questions. What happened? What was that ship? Where did it go? No one had answers. Within a week, the story had spread to every corner of the Concordance. The humans had returned. They had built a ship that could stop time itself. They had passed through the greatest military force in galactic history like it was nothing. They had stood before the High Arbiter and delivered their terms. And then they had left. The Concordance began to crumble almost immediately. It was not war that destroyed them. It was not weapons or battles or bloodshed. It was fear, pure and simple fear. The foundation of the Concordance had always been power, the belief that they were the strongest force in the universe, the knowledge that no one could challenge them. The adamantine had proven that belief to be false. Species that had been conquered began to whisper. If the humans could defy the Concordance, perhaps others could too. If the humans could build weapons that stopped time, perhaps liberation was possible. If the humans had shown mercy when they could have chosen destruction, perhaps they would help others who asked. One by one, the enslaved worlds began to rebel. One by one, the conquered species rose up. One by one, the chains of 12,000 years began to break. Within 10 years, the Galactic Concordance had collapsed. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. High Arbiter Keth Voss died alone in his throne room, surrounded by the ghosts of his crimes. The great fleet scattered. The golden corridors of Axion Prime fell silent. And on Earth, humanity finally emerged from the darkness. They came up from the underground bunkers where they had lived for 30 years. They climbed into the sunlight and felt the wind on their faces and looked up at the stars with new eyes. They were no longer frightened. They were no longer hiding. They were no longer alone. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on a hillside in what had once been Argentina. The grass was green. The sky was blue. Birds sang in the trees. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Lieutenant Commander Okonkwo stood beside her. He was crying. He did not try to hide it. I never thought I would see this, he said. I grew up underground. I was born in a bunker. I never saw the sun until I was 20 years old. And now, he spread his arms wide. Now I can stand here and breathe and not be afraid. Elena put her hand on his shoulder. This is why we did it, she said. Not for revenge, not for glory. For this, for the chance to live without fear. For our children and their children to grow up under open skies. In the years that followed, humanity reached out to the newly freed worlds. They did not come as conquerors. They did not come as masters. They came as friends, as liberators, as allies. The species that had suffered under the Concordance found in humanity a partner who understood their pain. The humans had been threatened. The humans had been bombed. The humans had been told they were nothing, and the humans had risen anyway. A new alliance formed, not like the Concordance, not built on fear and power and slavery, built on respect, built on freedom, built on the understanding that all beings, no matter how small or strange or different, deserve the chance to determine their own fate. They called it the Terran Compact, Earth at its center, 100 worlds around it, growing every year, and in the deepest halls of alien councils, in whispered warnings passed from elder to child, a new truth took root, a legend that would be told for 10,000 years. Do not threaten the humans. Do not harm their children. Do not mistake their kindness for weakness. Do not assume that their mercy means they are soft. For when humanity is pushed to the edge, they do not break. They do not flee. They do not surrender. They build something that makes the stars themselves hold their breath. Captain Elena Vasquez lived to be 94 years old. She retired from the Navy with every honor humanity could give. She spent her final years on a small farm in the countryside, surrounded by grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had never known fear. On the day she died, she sat in a chair by the window, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was slow and peaceful. The adamantine was never deployed again. It sat in a secret shipyard, maintained by engineers who understood what it represented. A reminder, a warning, a promise. The galaxy remembered the day of frozen stars. They remembered the black ship that stopped time. They remembered the woman who could have chosen vengeance and chose mercy instead. And they remembered the words carved into the bow of the greatest warship ever built. We remember, we forgive nothing, and we are no longer afraid. The stars never forgot, neither did humanity.